Shalom, good morning all. We continue the reading of Daniel chapter 7 to 9, doing part 1, and tomorrow's chapters 10 to 12 will be part 2 of the prophecies of these two sections. Now with the nation and land of Israel being Yahweh God's chosen land, its history becomes part of the knowledge for our salvation. The book of Daniel, prophecies and history confirms those prophecies came true. I shall therefore cover part of that history. It should correct any inherited beliefs replacement theologians commonly teach and others believe. It is not a thorough nor comprehensive study of Daniel, only a skeleton. And I say the prophecies are to do with Israel and God's people, not Christians and Christian or world history, unless they impact on Israel and its people. According to the dates of the events, chapter 7 comes before chapter 5. We can read about this in chapter 7 verses 1 and chapters 5 verses 30. That's in the chronological order. This vision of the four beasts parallels the vision of Nebuchadnezzar in chapter 2, when he had this vision of the statue. Here there is a greater emphasis on the end times, the world events as relating to Israel. The image of chapter 2 is said to represent the four empires that would rule over Jerusalem, while the beast of chapter 7 speaks of them individually and how the changes between one empire and the next would take place. The lion represents Nebuchadnezzar, as in chapter 2, the head of gold is him. The plucking of his wings, which we shall read, is said to represent his insanity and granting of a human mind, or the heart of man, being his conversion. We read that yesterday in chapter 4, verse 1 to 37. The bear is the Medo-Persian joint empire being raised up on one side, chapter 7, verse 5. It was an unequal collaboration, with the Persians eventually gaining supremacy over the Medes. The three ribs is said to probably be the three empires absorbed by the Persian Empire, Babylon, Egypt, and Lydia. The leopard refers to Greece, and its four wings and heads speaks of divisions of the Greek Empire into four sections after the death of its leader, Alexander the Great. We read this in chapter 8, verses 8 and verses 21 and 22. The last unnamed beast represents Rome. The iron teeth of chapter 7, verse 7 speaks of Rome's unequal military strength. Chapter 7, verse 19, as does iron represent the feet of image in chapter 2. The 10 horns corresponding to the 10 toes of the image of chapter 2. Note the mouth speaks blasphemies against God, correlating to the description of the beast in Revelation chapters 13, verses 5 to 7. It campaigns against the saints for 3.5 times, which equals 42 months of Revelation chapters 13, verses 5 to 7. But the beast is finally destroyed and cast into the lake of fire, Revelation chapters 19, verse 20. So, coming on to chapter 7, this is the summary of it. It is written in Aramaic. It is the first vision of Daniel. Prior to this, he was merely interpreting others' visions like those of the kings of Babylon. Remember, this is written in Aramaic, signifying it's a message to the pagans. It occurs in the first year of King Belshazzar, the Babylonian, from whom the Medes took power at the end of chapter 5. While in bed at night, Daniel has a dream or a vision in which he saw an event which he wrote down. It was not like the subsequent other times when he was at prayer or by a river. This vision concerns four great beasts diverse from each other. Like a lion representing the first kingdom, Babylon, head of gold, of statue in Daniel 2. Like a bear representing Medo-Persia, the chest of silver of Daniel chapters 2. Like a leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads, representing the belly and thighs of the brass of Daniel's statue, Daniel 2. The 4 wings and 4 heads represent the 4 subsequent divisions of, as I said, the third Grecian empire of Alexander the Great when he died. The 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, represents the last empire, Rome. This last beast had 4 horns, or kings. Then an 11th came up and plucked up 3 of the previous 10 kings. It then went on to do some terrible things, but in the end was slain and destroyed by fire. But the last verse, 28, we are told, hitherto is the end of the matter, signifying all the vision is explained or interpreted as I explained yesterday, which is the meaning of the word interpretation, is to explain. So reading from Daniel chapter 7 verse 1, Daniel's vision of the 4 beasts.
Chapter 7. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head upon his bed. Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of the heaven strove upon the great sea, and 4 great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. The first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. After this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it, and it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of man, and a mouth speaking great things. I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. Thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judgment was set, and the books were opened.
Verse 13.
I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. And there was given him dominion, and glory, and a kingdom, that all people, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed.
So notice as all people of all nations were to serve in the same kingdom. That's one criteria of salvation for all, Jew or Gentile. See above chapter 7 verse 13, and also Mark, book of Mark, chapters 14 verse 62. Continuing from verse 17, Daniel's vision is interpreted, meaning to explained, not translating into another language.
I came near unto one of them that stood by, and asked him the truth of all this. So he told me, and made me know the interpretation of the things. These great beasts which are 4 kings which shall arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom, and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. Then I would know the truth of the fourth beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron, and his nails of brass.
Verse 20.
Now before we go, just to go back a little bit to the hair like snow and wool. The verse 9 refers to the colour of the hair, not its texture. Snow and pure wool were used as imageries, colour comparisons in biblical times. If his hair was white like a toilet, we should not expect it to be hard like porcelain.
21 goes on to read, I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints, and prevailed against them, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High, and the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. Verse 25, and he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. And they shall be given into his hand until a time and times, and the dividing of time. But the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion, to consume and to destroy it unto the end. So chapter 7:25 refers to attempts to change God's times and laws with decrees of man or governments or ruling authority, whether religious or otherwise.
Such as changing
Moving
Yahweh.
on to chapter 8, a summary, so you understand it when you're reading it. It was written in Hebrew this time, which deals with the change of the second to third kingdoms, Media Persia to Greece. We are told it is the second vision after the first, in verse 1. Daniel is in Shushan, a palace of Elam by the river Ulai. He lifts up his eyes and sees the vision, so I assume he was awake. Also, though he was in a deep sleep in verse 18, he is woken up. In Daniel chapter 7, he is in bed, and in chapter 10, he is by the river Hiddekel. The vision deals with the ram of two horns and what he did to the he-goat. Gabriel is told to explain the vision to Daniel. Gabriel explains to the end of the little horn's demise. In the explanation, we are told in verse 20, the ram is Media Persia, and in verse 21 that the he-goat is Grecia, out of whom 4 kings come. This corresponds with Daniel chapter 7 verse 8 and 11 verse 4. We are then told what a little horn of verse 9 would do. One of those things being, quote, magnify himself even to the prince of the host and taking away the daily. What is the daily? In Daniel 11:21, Michael the archangel is called a prince. Sorry, the daily is the daily sacrifices. We see that later on. In Daniel 11:21, Michael the archangel is called a prince. In Lamentations chapters 1 verses 9 to 10, we are told how one magnifies themselves. Lamentations 1:9 says, for the enemy have magnified himself. The adversary hath spread out his hands upon all her pleasant things, for she being Israel, she hath seen that the heathen entered into her sanctuary, whom thou didst command that they should not enter into thy sanctuary. So that is how the enemy magnified themselves in God's premise. We covered this in the earlier chapters. If one reads the book of the Maccabees, they would see this is exactly how a person called Antiochus Epiphanes caused a desolation in the sanctuary, which led to its cleansing in accordance with the 2,300 days, so it's quoted, predictions given in verse 14. It's actually 2,300 evenings and mornings, but the King James and some Bibles has it as days. but I'll explain that in a moment. That cleansing, which is said to include a miraculous event of 1 day supply of oil used for the lamps, lasting 8 days, and led to the institution of Hanukkah as a Jewish festival. They do it around about Christmas times before our Christians normal Christmas. But this is probably not the fact, but an addition to the story hundreds of years after the actual event of the Maccabees. The cleansing was an 8-day dedication service of the temple and the rebuilt altar of the sacrifice, of which the last day was a special Sabbath, a joyful celebration. Hence the feast is called the Feast of Dedication. And we read about this in one of the Gospels. The chapter 8, ends stating what the vision was about, the evening and morning sacrifice system, as found in Exodus chapters 29, verse 39, Ezekiel verse 43, verse 23, and as I said, the 2,300 days, the 2,300 evening and mornings were the times they did the sacrifices. Okay, reading from chapter 8, verse 1, a few verses.
Chapter 8. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at the first. And I saw in a vision, and it came to pass when I saw that I was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in a vision, and I was by the river of Ulai. Then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had 2 horns, and the 2 horns were high. But one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beasts might stand before him, neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand. But he did according to his will, and became great.
So as I said in verse 8:3, one of the horns, the Medo-Persians, was stronger than the alliance with the Medes. The Persian was higher than the Medes. Continuing from verse 5.
As I was considering, behold, an he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. And he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power. And I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler against him, and smote the ram, and brake his 2 horns. And there was no power in the ram to stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground, and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of heaven. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great, toward the south, and toward the east, and toward the pleasant land.
The goat is Alexander, the Great Horn of Greece Empire, taken over from the Medo-Persians. Then after Alexander's death, divided into 4 according to the 4 army generals, and for it came up 4 notable ones, is the way it's put in the Bible. Then out of those 4, one was stronger and took over as the little horn. It's actually says, out of one of them, meaning out of one of the 4, in 8:9. See also verses 20 to 22. This is Antiochus Epiphanes, who fulfilled these prophecies, including Daniel 8:11, by entering the sanctuary and defiling it by the offering of a pig on the altar. Now, Antiochus Epiphanes is a title, so it's not talking about one particular man. It's one man who held a title, just like you have Pharaoh or Emperor. Different people hold those different titles. Daniel 8:11 reads, Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of the sanctuary was cast down. And as I said, Lamentations 1:9 says, O Yahweh, behold my affliction, for the enemy hath magnified himself, the adversary hath spread out his hands upon all her pleasant things, for she hath seen that the heathen entered into the sanctuary, whom thou didst command that they should not enter into thy congregation. Ezekiel 44:7 says, "In that ye have brought into my sanctuary strangers, uncircumcised in heart and uncircumcised in flesh, to be in my sanctuary, to pollute it." So things that should not be done. Continuing from Daniel chapters 8 verse 14, which reads, "And he said unto me," this is Daniel asking the question, how long will the sanctuary be defiled and how long it take to be cleansed? And the answer came to him, he said unto me, "Unto 2,300 evening and mornings, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed." As I said, some Bibles will have it as 2,300 days. And after that came a big mistake from one of the founders of the Adventist Church, who thought 2,300 days meant literal days. And I said, I have in previous chapter commentary referred to the error of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in following one of its founders' interpretations of 2,300 days, or 814. I showed, as does verse 26, that days refers to the continual evening and morning sacrifices that Israel was commanded to do as an identification of them and their God Yahweh.
So go back and look at the previous day studies, see the Daniel chapters 1 to 4 or 5 to 6, I think.
In the King James Version, it commonly refers you to the correct meaning in the margin of the Bible. Some other versions have it as evenings and mornings rather than days. The SDA Seventh-day Adventists would argue an evening and a morning make a day, but they fail to understand, firstly, the two different uses of the word day in Genesis chapters 1 verse 5. There, specifically, the light part is called a day and the dark part is called a night. Then the complete joined parts are also called a day and given a Hebrew word numeric identification number of H3117. So in other words, when the Bible is talking about a day as in 24 hours, it uses the Hebrew word with the numerical number H3117. So the word day in Daniel 8:14 is not that H3117. It is actually two separate words identifying specific parts of the day when the evening and morning sacrifices are continually done, and those two words are evening and morning. The Hebrew word identification is H6153 and H1242. I say not H3177, which you will see in verse 26. Just so you know the difference between the day of 8:14 and the day in verse 26. Okay, continuing reading from verse 20, the interpretation of the vision. The ram which thou sawest, having two horns, are the kings of Media and Persia, and the rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. Now that being broken, whereas four stood up for it, 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power. Verse 26, and the vision, so when the angel was finished explaining the thing to Daniel, it then says, and the vision of the evening and morning, which was told is true, wherefore shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days. And in this verse 26 you see all the 3 words, the evening, H6153, and the morning, the H1242, and the days, the H3117. So you know the 3 different words. See also chapters 11 and 12. For example, chapters 11 verse 31. Read or listen to the 3 books of the Maccabees for further historical confirmation of how the temple was cleansed. Those books and others were originally included in the Bible compilations, but were omitted when compiling the common 66 books of Genesis to Revelations that's used today. So in other words, the Maccabees and some others were taken out of the present compilation. Moving on to chapter 9. A summary of chapter 9 is It is in the first year of Darius the Mede. Daniel is reading the book of Jeremiah. The word book is also can be used for the scroll, what they call a letter or a scroll. So he's reading this. He's praying at his usual stipulated 3 times per day and fasting. Note the reason for Israel's punishment was departing from the law. We read this in verse 11. Then note how God felt about it, and just one part of the consequences of the punishment for them breaking God's laws while all of this took place. We read this in Lamentations, chapter 4, verse 10. The reason I point this out is so we ought to remember these things when we are told keeping the law has been cancelled, when clearly God was really angry and punished people severely for not keeping his laws. Verse 24 states that 70 weeks or years of the prophecy given to Jeremiah regarding, quote, thy people is coming to an end. So we know the prophecy given, they explained to Daniel is about Jewish people, his people. The same prophecy is given to Jeremiah. Maybe even if it wasn't coming to an end, maybe it had just ended with the overthrowing of Babylon. Jeremiah chapter 25 verse 11 reads, and this whole land shall be a desolation and an astonishment, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years. And it shall come to pass, when 70 years are accomplished, that I will punish the king of Babylon, and that nation, saith Yahweh, for their iniquity, and the land of the Chaldeans, and I will make it perpetual desolation. Verse 14 says God will also punish the other empires. So God uses one nation, empire, to punish another. So he used the Medes to punish Babylon, and the Greeks to punish the Medes and Persians, and so on. We are then given some other time prophecies in verses 25 to 27. These are 7 weeks and 62 weeks. But note the word translated as weeks in English means a set of 7 in Hebrews. But to us, not the Israelites, that commonly translates into weeks. And that's where we get some errors in prophecy when people use Christian translation of words rather than the Hebrew ones. These start from a commandment to restore and rebuild Jerusalem as found in Nehemiah chapters 2 verse 1, and relates to the building of the streets and walls even in troubled times. So hopefully it's all coming together now. Okay, reading Daniel chapter 9 verse 1, Daniel's prayer for his people.
Chapter 9. In the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, of the seed of the Medes, which was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by books the number of the years, whereof the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolations of Jerusalem. And I set my face unto the Lord God to seek by prayer and supplications, with fasting and sackcloth and ashes. And I prayed unto the Lord my God, and made my confession, and said, O Lord, the great and dreadful God, keeping the covenant and mercy to them that love him, and to them that keep his commandments, we have sinned, and have committed iniquity, and have done wickedly, and have rebelled, even by departing from thy precepts and from thy judgments. Neither have we hearkened unto thy servants the prophets, which spake in thy name to our kings, our princes, and our fathers, and to all the people of the land. O Lord, righteousness belongeth unto thee, but unto us confusion of faces, as at this day, to the men of Judah, and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and unto all Israel that are near, and that are far off, through all the countries whither thou hast driven them, because of their trespass, that they have trespassed against thee. O Lord, to us belongeth confusion of face, to our kings, to our princes, and to our fathers, because we have sinned against thee. To the Lord our God belong mercies and forgiveness, though we have rebelled against him. Neither have we obeyed the voice of the Lord our God, to walk in his laws, which he set before us by his servants the prophets. Yea, all Israel have transgressed thy law, even by departing, that they might not obey thy voice. Therefore the curse is poured upon us. and the oath that is written in the law of Moses, the servant of God, because we have sinned against him.
So Daniel says the reason for this because it broke the law of Moses. Read the rest of Daniel's great prayer. Use it as a model in Nehemiah chapters 1 verse 1 to 11 and based in promise found in Jeremiah chapters 29 verses 10 to 11. God wishes good for us, that none perishes and follows through on that wish if we show we truly love him over traditions of men by keeping his commandments, not man's, kings, nor religious denominations. It is written after Moses, Judges, and some of the prophets, writings and teachings, and teachings that if we keep God's laws, he blesses us as he promised. This principle is clear. God punishes those who do not keep his laws. They do not get rewarded and are kept out of his promise. Continuing from verse 24, chapter 9, the 70 weeks. It says, 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city, to finish the transgression and to make an end of sins and to make reconciliation for iniquity and to bring in everlasting righteousness and to seal up the vision and prophecy and to anoint the most holy. Talking about the Messiah. So see, Judah sinned, went to Babylon, and that sin has now been forgiven because they've done the 70 years punishment. But then there's also a future prophecy about when Israel will have a chance to be forgiven for their sins when the Assyrians scattered them. And that's when the Messiah will come and try and reunite the two sticks of Israel, the stick of Judah and the stick of Israel, as we talked about in the past. So as I said, this is not a prophecy study, but one of what is needed for salvation. Chapter 8 should confirm that what we so far have learned. The keeping of God's laws, commandments are essential. When the Messiah is born and risen, faith in his atoning blood would be added, and I say added, to the keeping of the commandments for transgressors. Revelations 14 verse 12, here is the patience of the saints, here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Yeshua. Revelations 22:14, we've covered many times, blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have a right to the tree of life and may enter in through the gates into the city. The teachings of Moses and the apostles is Acts chapters 26 verse 18, to open their eyes and to turn them from darkness to light and from the power of Satan unto God, that they may receive forgiveness of sins and inheritance among them which are sanctified by faith, that is, in me. Revelation 21 verse 24, and the nations of they which are saved shall walk in the light of it, and the kings of the earth do bring their glory and honor into it, the city. So, hope you understand, everything is pointing to getting people back to keeping God's laws. Shalom, until tomorrow, God willing.